I'm an audit partner at PwC, and I don't like auditing. I actually hate it. I hate auditing itself. But what I do like about it is teaching, reflecting, mentoring, business development, getting new clients, developing new relationships. I gave a shir in between Nechamav on Rosh Hashanah once. And he's like, wow, I really enjoyed this year. Do you want to give a Chumash year on Thursday nights? And I think that's a little bit of a lost art, Be'i and Chumash. And then I got into fundraising. And I realized that I honed that skill in terms of being able to help organizations fundraise as well. I'm not saying that you shouldn't pick something that is not fulfilling. Of course it should be fulfilling. But I think we might be erring too much on the side of, well, if it's not fulfilling, I'm not going to do it. I need to feel good about my life.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Shtark Tank. Shtark Tank is a podcast about the challenges and opportunities of being a mentor in the workforce. This week, we are joined by Dov Adler. He's an audit partner at PwC. He learns and teaches a lot of Torah, is involved in Chessed and nonprofits and fundraising as well. I look forward to discussing all this with you, Dov, so welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Yaakov. It's really a chus to be on. I listen to Shtark Tank all the time. It's one of my new favorite podcasts.
Awesome. So let's jump into it. With your, upbringing, you grew up in a rabbinic home. You are a rabbi's son. So tell us a little bit about what that was like, growing up in such a home. What were the enjoyable things, less enjoyable things about that?
Sure. I really appreciate that. So I grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey. My father was Rabbi Dov Adler, Zichrono Livracha. He just nifter in September. And growing up, overall, I had a brother and two sisters. And my parents never forced anything upon us. I think that was really the mantra of the home. And understandably, as anyone could understand, a rabbi is busy day and night. But I could tell you that it's very different than nowadays from what I see because there were no phones. So when my father was busy, he was on a physical phone, calling people back, doing his shiurim, doing his learning, constantly dealing with the tzibor, but he always made time for us. And every night he would come home for dinner. We'd have dinner between, let's say, 6 and 7 o'clock. And then he would go back out to the shul, teach shiurim, deal with the balabatim, deal with the phone calls, deal with the follow-ups. But to me, it was really a zechus. And each one of our siblings, you could see from the hespedim that we did at the Levaya, each one of us have our own personalities. And that really comes forward. And we each dealt with it a little bit differently. I always went to shul with my father when I was even 5, 6 years old, sitting right next to him. He was sitting in the front of the rabbi's seat. I would sit right next to him. I would stay in for his drashos. I'd stay in for his shiurim, what I could understand, what I can't understand. And to me, it was just something that I was always proud of. But of course, it came with a lot of different challenges overall. We only took 2 vacations. I tell my kids this all the time. We took 2 vacations. We went to Eretz Yisrael once when I was a kid. I went to Orlando once. And every other winter break was home. We would actually go to his school sometimes. That was some of the fun. So you can imagine some of the financial struggles or details, but we never felt like we missed out on anything and never felt like we didn't have anything. And it was really zechus to grow up in a shul, Rinat Yisrael. And he was a principal of TAPC also in terms of what he started later on, to really own that from a zechus in terms of that relationship and the kavod that I think the community really gave to him. And I really built up on that over the years.
The way you described those vacations, it almost sounded like, you went on 2 vacations, like you went to Orlando and Eretz Yisrael, like every year, like that's like the normal thing, right?
No.
Annually, you go.
No, far from it. Nowadays, it's a little bit different. And I tell my kids this all the time. And they're like, but we know when you were a kid, you never did vacations. You went to your Israel trip when you were 10. When we went to Eretz Yisrael, actually, I was 10 years old. And my siblings were a little bit younger. My father did not. We actually went for the whole summer. My father did not come for July because he was teaching in Lincoln Square, summer school, summer shiurim, and summer talmidim. He was teaching in Lincoln Square. And my mother took us for the first month. And he joined us in August. And that was one of the trips. And then in Orlando, 1983, still remember it. We went as a family. And that was the last time that we did that until much later in life. And it just gave us an appreciation of family time, but also recognizing that you just can't do what you want. You have to do what's in your means and within your boundaries.
Right. And so obviously, as you indicated, times do change and everyone has their own situation. Every generation, every family is different. But I'm sure there must have been a lot that you learned about, as you alluded to. I just like to maybe zoom in a little bit more on living a very happy and fulfilled life despite not having tons of money, extravagant externalities. And how do you communicate that to children and inculcate that in them?
Like I said, there was nothing that we felt like we were missing. And I think that's really because my father spent the time with us and my parents, my father and my mother, both of them, in terms of raising us, really dedicated a lot of time with us. We didn't feel like we were missing anything. We would talk to him all the time about what we had and what we hadn't, but it wasn't like, we can't do this or we can't do that. It was, let's go here. For the summers, we went to a bungalow colony. Dishner's bungalow colony until I was a little older and we could go to camp for a couple of months. And that was it. That was an amazing experience for us. And we had a whole chevra there. And for us, that was just the way that we were brought up. That was our life. This is the way it was. We didn't know anything better. But it wasn't like we were looking to our right, looking to our left, saying, I wish I had this, I wish I had that. It was also a lot simpler times. I don't think as many people went away in general, like you have nowadays with a lot of people going to Israel for Sukkot and Pesach and winter break and doing all different vacations, yada, yada, yada. The times were very, very different as well. So I don't think it had a significant differences, so to speak, even though we didn't feel it.
So you grew up in a rabbi's home. You had a great relationship and a great household growing up. So did you consider following in your father's footsteps as a rabbi yourself?
That's a great question, Yaakov. I get that all the time. I actually did. I love teaching. And even as a young adult, I would say 2021, my father would go on vacation and he let me give the drasha in Rena on Shabbos. And the first time I did that, really, really nervous. 400 families, a lot of Talmidei Chachamim, high level of learning in the shul. You have to prepare something well. I'd go over with him in advance just what I wanted to say. And I realized that that was something that I liked and I enjoyed, and I could do that. But I also saw the life of Rabbanos, the constant busyness every single minute without the financial reward. And to me, I wanted a little bit of a different balance. So I thought about that. I spoke to a lot of people. My father set me up with a lot of members of the shul to talk about finance, accounting, different professions. Two things I knew I didn't want to do. I did not want to be a doctor. I did not want to be a lawyer. So after that, the world was open to me in terms of that. I chose accounting because it was more reliable, so to speak. There wasn't as many fluctuations in the market, ups and downs. We have our busy seasons. Every job you got to work hard at. But I chose that, and I realized that I could be fulfilled in a lot of other ways. Getting involved with the community, continue to do serious learning, and continue to build on that as my life progressed, which really has come to fruition in a lot of different ways.
It's interesting. One of the things that you mentioned is that you had these early experiences, a very young guy speaking in front of a big kila, in front of a accomplished chachamim, and that's not what scared you away. That's not what turned you down. You did find yourself. You made it sound like that was you were able to handle that, and I'm wondering how you did handle that because a lot of people they come up, they're young, they don't necessarily see themselves as rabbis because like there are older people who have been around more, maybe learning more, and then that that in itself is a factor that turns them away from chinuch and rabbanos, forgetting all the other things. So what do you think gave you the confidence to do that, stand up in front of a whole shul at 20 years old?
My father gave me the confidence. There's no one else that gave me the confidence other than my father. I would learn with him a lot growing up. And like I said, me and my brother were very different, but I would take advantage of the fact, learn with him on Shabbos afternoons, learn with him a little bit during the week. I learned with him from my bar mitzvah, consistent study around Mishnayos. So we constantly had that ideas. After drushes that he would give, I would love to give him ha'aros on the drushes. And I still do today. Could ask Rabbi Newberger. It's one of my favorite things. When I go with Rabbi Newberger and I give him a nice little ha'ara and he likes it, he's like, oh, that's really good. He does. He's like, okay, he can work on that a little bit. A little bit quiet, but you got to keep trying. So I never had that lack of confidence. And my father said the first time he asked me to do it, I said, I can't do this. I'm 20, 21 years old. I can't get up in front of the entire shul and give a drasha. And he's like, no, you can. You really have something to say. Think about, develop it, work at it with me. And the key was just going ahead and doing it. And I realized that people get highs for all different things, all different ways that they go, performances in front of people. It really gave me the confidence once people reacted in a different way. And they were like, wow, Dov, that was really good. Love to give you something else. You give me another opportunity. It got to the point where Yom Noraim, there were too many minyanim. There was a rabbi, an assistant rabbi, and we had 3 to 4 minyanim, sometimes 5 minyanim. I'd get a slot on Yom Kippur night. I'd get a slot on Rosh Hashanah because the tzibur was asking, and they really appreciated what I could bring to the table because of me modeling my father. And I tell kids nowadays all the time, I see kids walking out for drashas. It's the worst thing to do. Even if you're not learning anything, stay in for the rabbi's drasha. Even through osmosis, you're going to pick something up, but you'll pick up a style. You'll pick up a mahalif in drush that I really modeled after my father and tried to take in my own direction as I grew up. So I wasn't scared about getting up in front of a crowd. I model professional speaking. I model public speaking all the time. It's something that I've really crafted and honed on. When I was a kid, I was much more shy. 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, did not want to speak. The Gabbai always asked me to do a Don Olam. Always asked me to do Yigdal. Never wanted to do it. Never, 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 never. But once I got it to being more of an adult, so to speak, even a young adult, I was able to really weave in the speaking aspect. And that's something that I love doing. I love speaking at work, conferences, all different areas, and of course, giving Torah.
Amazing, amazing. And I also certainly appreciate the importance of public speaking as a skill. It's something I also sort of developed slowly over time, but have come to enjoy it. Also, the importance of staying in for drashos. I believe my Rabbi, Rav Aaron Friedman, who's today the Rosh Yeshiva of Karen Biavne, once told me that he has tremendous hakaras tov for his father, forcing him to stay into drashos for his local shurov, who I believe was Rav Shlomo Volbe. But at the time, he couldn't stand it, but he, looking back, really does appreciate it. So that's very interesting as well. So let's go a little more into your work. You said you became an accountant. So maybe tell us a little bit about what that was like in the early days, starting out as a young guy, a frum guy in the accounting world. What were some of the shocks that you encountered when you started out?
Sure. I graduated YU in 1997, started at Coopers and Lybrand. That was before they merged with Price Waterhouse, PW, to make PwC. That happened in July 1998. Started as an associate in our capital markets practice, dealing with financial services clients. And then we were developing a hedge fund practice, an asset management practice, small startup hedge funds were starting. But the first decision that I had to make working into the workforce was, do I wear a kippah? And even in the late 90s, most people did not wear kippahs. And when I got to Coopers and Lybrand, there was nobody wearing a kippah. And me and another friend, we decided that we're going to CNL. And another one of my good friends, Mark Rosenbaum, went to Price Waterhouse, and we always joke about that. And I spoke to my father, understood the halacha, and I just felt more uncomfortable not wearing it than wearing it. And I felt like it's going to be a good heker for me going into the workforce, understanding who you are, representing a Kiddush Baruch Hu, representing Torah, all of that we preach. I had the opportunity to put into practice. And I wore a kippah. And I could tell you that it had an impact. It had an impact both ways because you definitely felt people looking at you in a little bit of a different way, even if they know you're Jewish. When you're from and you're wearing a kippah in a conference room with 15 people and you're the only one, it's a little bit jarring sometimes. As I became manager, I started thinking about, will this impact me becoming a partner? Yes or no? I didn't think it would, but you never know down the road how things work out. Baruch Hashem, PwC is a very, very diverse environment and encourages all that. And as I worked throughout my career, I had different experiences, had different opportunities to go on business development. I made partner in 2008, and I was one of the first partners to wear a kippah. And to me, that was really, really proud. And I look back now, over the last 20 years, PwC is filled with people from Brooklyn and Lakewood and Teaneck and Five Towns, all over the place, wearing kippahs. I'm very proud of that we're able to start that.
Amazing. And you mentioned that, when you were deliberating about this, you saw it as a real opportunity to make a Kiddush Hashem, to apply the values that you learn in shul and at home and in yeshiva in the outside world, and spread the light onward. Was that something that you had considered before when you were deciding between being a rabbi and not? That's sort of part one of the question. And to add a part two is, do you think that people appreciate this point enough that you can really have a very important mission in a Kadosh Baruch Hu's world, specifically through making Kiddush Hashem at work? Or do people sort of just try to get by at work and then really realize and express their voice Hashem back home in the base medrash at night?
Your question is so poignantly on target for today's times. So I'll start off by reflecting in terms of the decision of me to become a rabbi or not. It had nothing to do with it. I just like to teach. I like to learn. I like to teach. I like that aspect of communicating. I like mentoring at work. One of the things that I like doing at work, and I'm an audit partner at PwC, and I say this all the time, and my teams laugh. I don't like auditing. I actually hate it. I hate auditing itself, the blocking and tackling of deciding two different things. You issue an opinion on the financial statements that 99 out of 100.99% of the time, you know the answer before you start. But what I do like about it is teaching, reflecting, mentoring, business development, getting new clients, developing new relationships. And that's the same thing with teaching. And that's the same skill set that I enjoyed as to what I decided to do with my career. So that really, Kiddush Hashem or no, had no aspect in that. But at work, we talk about this all the time. And at work, we talk about this all the time around the fact that you have, whether you're wearing a kippah or not, everyone knows you're Jewish. They for sure know that you're from when you're leaving early on Fridays. You can deal with the Yom Tov and whatnot. And you have that opportunity in a lot of different ways. But as I roll the camera forward, as I look to today's days and age, I'm constantly talking to kids about not taking the shortcuts, not leaving early, not walking out because your second cousin's getting married again and it's busy season, or your best friend, or so and so, and how do I work things out? Or working from home consistently and never coming into the office because it's more convenient. So now I think we really see an ebb and a flow around. It's more of an attitude around the kids nowadays. And I hate saying that from a perspective of just preaching. I don't want to preach around that, but it is something that kids that are coming out of college, coming out of YU, coming out of other organizations have to be more understanding that when you're taking the lazy way out, it reflects poorly on your Yiddishkeit, on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and everything that you're trying not to do. And you have a tremendous opportunity to be the exact opposite.
That's so interesting. So there's a few things I want to follow up on that. First, maybe we'll start with that last point about the shortcuts, which is very interesting. I at a certain point in yeshiva, I came across this book by a guy named Tim Ferriss called The 4 Hour Work Week. And I thought it was a very interesting concept because I was like, wait a second, doesn't the Mesilas Yesharim quote the Mishnah Perkei Avos, which says that you're supposed to be memait be'esek lasuk b'Torah, and the Mesilas Yesharim elaborates that you're supposed to really try to minimize your work as much as you can and really maximize your time for learning as much as possible. Those two ideas seem to click together in my mind, and they also seem to be expressed in what you described as sort of an unhealthy attitude towards work. You're dafka saying, no, you shouldn't be memait be'esek. You should be marbe be'esek because you're making Kiddush Hashem. So how do you think about that Mamar Chazal, that source, and how it pertains to the current reality that you described?
Torah. It goes both ways. I'll quote that Ma'amar Chazal. That from an overall perspective, you have to know the balance. Going out every single night with the non-Jews on your team to a bar is not needed. Hanging out once in a while, understanding which ones, if you're an associate, when the partner is going to be there, that's important. When the client's going to be there, that's important. It's much more important to time management and pick and choose when you're going to be going above and beyond. But to get the basic job done, there's a given time frame. And I tell my team all the time, I don't care how many hours you work, as long as you get the job done. So if an associate could get the job done in a 4-hour work week, which is impossible, we're actually in the middle of busy season right now. March is the busiest month of the year for many public accountants. If you could get the job done in 4 hours, kol hakavod. But if it takes you 18 hours a day between January, February, March, during the summer, you might be able to work 4 hours a day. And that's okay also. So you have to be able to know what the system requires of you to put your whole in. And while you're there, give it your whole. What I'm finding is that even while they're at the office, people are constantly distracted. This is nothing new. It's 2026. You're distracted by 1,000 things. However, if you're able to focus on getting that work done, developing relationships, a lot of kids don't realize how important it is to develop relationships because relationships drive business, relationships drives everything in your life. But it takes time and effort to put that time in after work sometimes, going out for a lunch. That yes, if I spend an hour going out for a lunch with a client, I might have to stay an hour later doing my work, but that's worth it. So you really have to be able to balance what you're doing and what you're choosing. And it's not replacing your Torah learning. And we could get into this a little bit later, but Torah learning is primary and has to be a part of your life consistently if it's something that's important to you.
It's interesting because you mentioned the tendency or the temptation to work from home every single day if there's a room for that. And so it was another sort of thing that came up, which that I was started to think a little more about my transition from yeshiva to the workforce right as the pandemic was hitting and the entire world of work was shifting. I was like, wow, this is a great opportunity for people to shave hours off of their week and maximize it for Torah learning. So all these things sort of in my mind were like, there are all these opportunities that come up that could, lead you to be memait basic pasuk b'Torah. But on the other hand, you're saying there's also a value in doing the best job you can, even if that maybe comes al cheshbon or on account instead of certain hours of Torah learning, maybe not the kriyas but other opportunities. So it's just really a balance that you have to strike.
100%. You have to strike that balance. And people talk about work-life balance. Work-life balance to me, one of my early mentors his name was Brendan Dewar. He was an old partner at the firm. And he would say work-life balance is on an annual basis, not a daily basis, sometimes a monthly basis, sometimes a 3-month basis. That I know as an accountant, when I was 24 years old, I was working from 9 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock in the morning every single February, March. And that was not changing. I still would try and chop learning in here and there. Could I have my consistent seder with my chavrusa? It was way before any remote learning, any type of Zoom activity, no such thing. If it wasn't in person, it wasn't happening. So I knew that had to be sacrificed during that mini tekufa of time. But then you have to pick it up again. You have to make sure that you're making up the hours, or when you have more time, do what you're doing with the more time. And Rabbi Newberger talks about this all the time, that when you have the free time and when you have the ability to set aside time to do whatever, if you set aside that time for learning, that's showing you where your mindset is. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu really treats it as if your other busy time is l'shem shamayim as well. If you're taking the time to spend time learning on a Sunday morning, when you're not going to work, and even during busy season, when you're working till 2 in the morning, your Sundays are a little bit lighter, to take a half hour in the morning, to have an extra seder. When you're doing that, it's showing where your mind wants to be and what your heart wants to be, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu treats it appropriately.
Amazing. That is very, very beautiful. The other thing that you were speaking about is the fact that on the one hand, you hate your work, and on the other hand, you love your work. So it was very interesting how you described that. And the other sort of dynamic that you touched on is the fact that the industry that you're in, the job title that you have, and the skill sets that you have there's a way to make those two things work together. So I'm wondering if you could describe how you think people should go about finding careers that are fulfilling, meaningful, to what extent you should be looking for that, not for that. How do you balance your skill sets, what you're passionate about, what's going to make you the most parnasa? How do we put all things together? Because you, in a very few sentences, sort of smashed some of the paradigms around, following your passion, following your calling, and all that stuff. So it's a lot more nuanced. It's very different. I'm wondering if you could try to give an overview on that topic.
Yeah, of course, Yaakov. I don't mean to smash the paradigms, but the first thing you have to do is establish your goals. What do you want out of your career? What are your goals in terms of long and short term? But also your attitude. To me, this is also a shift in generation. I don't mean to be harping on it, but when I started work, I was 21 years old. I got married young. I had to pay my bills. My number one requirement for a job was, am I going to be able to pay my bills, the nachas over the course of my career? And it is going to give me the ability and the flexibility to live within a certain amount of nachas. And the attitude was, I got to go to work. I got to work hard. I got to be able to advance and work my way up, whether I like it or not. Nowadays, you are going to be changing firms a lot more than we are in terms of as we're growing up. But picking and choosing your career is very important. I'm not saying that you shouldn't pick something that is not fulfilling. Of course, it should be fulfilling. But I think we might be erring too much on the side of, well, if it's not fulfilling, I'm not going to do it. I need to feel good about my life. You know what those jobs are. You want to be a doctor, you want to be a Rabbi, you want to be into chinuch, you want to be a Rav. Everyone knows what the real fulfilling jobs are. You want to be a psychologist. What I try and do is, and it's possible to do this, to pick the fulfillment, even in the professional jobs that on the surface don't seem fulfilling, and make them fulfilling. Get involved with mentorship, get involved with business development, get involved with helping someone else just get a job. So you're part of a big firm, you could make a referral. You could speak to people how to practice their interviews. You could help the tzibur by just going back to your alma mater. Let's take YU. Going back to YU as a second year associate. Now you're 23 years old. You're going back to YU to give back, to tell these people how you made it through, what you do, what were your processes, and that sort of helps you with the fulfillment. So do you have to be fulfilled? I think yes, to an extent, but you also have to appreciate life is very expensive. It's not getting cheaper. It's expensive to be a firm Jew, especially where we live overall, whether you're in Eretz Yisrael or in America, wherever you're living, it's expensive all over the place. And there's different parameters of that, but you have to be able to assess what is your passion balanced by what your needs are for your family.
And you mentioned that, you said that when you were a young man, and maybe these things are different nowadays, you had bills, they were on you to pay. That was the end of the story. And today things are very different. Guys oftentimes will get married and they'll learn a little bit, and their parents will help them. So I'm not expecting you to say anything bad, Chas Shalom, about some extra Torah learning, but I think you were alluding to a phenomenon where people have financial dependence for a lot longer, and that sort of creates different expectations and different standards. So is that something that you view with some level of concern?
Yes, I know. I'm a big supporter. I have kids right now in Ramada School who I have a son-in-law learning the mirror. I have another son-in-law who took a year off to learn also when they got married. I'm a big supporter of if you have the ability, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu has blessed you with that, and you want your son-in-law, daughter-in-law to learn for a couple of years, kol kavod. I think it gives you a foundation. I view learning as building a house, building building blocks. It's not the time and effort that you're doing for that moment, but you're building a foundation for your career and for your life of Yahadus and of Avodas Hashem. So the more that you could get in, the bigger the foundation you have. If you don't have if you don't have to go to work, let's say, and you have parents, in-laws that are willing to support you, but after a year or two, so to speak, there has to be a plan. There has to be an ability where you're going to become self-sufficient, where you're going to recognize that. And I'm not speaking down on anyone that's doing it for longer or shorter, but I don't want you to think I don't support that. I fully support if it's in the realm of your financial ability to support people in learning. I think that's very important, but as well as to train the younger generation, sons-in-law, daughters-in-law, etc., that there has to be a plan as you're moving forward for self-sufficiency.
It's interesting because e- even when I was like, young, before I was married, I was in yeshiva, and people would talk about plans, and it was like, I don't know, it was, it's exactly what you're talking about. Like, it sort of didn't resonate with me so much. And now I'm a little bit older, and some young people a little bit younger than me speak to me, and I end up talking about plans. But I guess maybe at the heart of that is like, maybe there's a certain sense of responsibility that if you're not really on tab and on being counted on for a certain something financially, then deep down it's sort of like it doesn't resonate as much. Is that possible?
100%. I think you hit the nail on the head. It doesn't resonate if someone's being supported and they don't find the ability to where they're at. And I don't know how much people give, how much people do, what bills they're paying, what apartments they're living in. It could create the perception, which is in the child's mind, my parents are going to do this forever. I think one of the issues also is around this topic, kids see a lot of affluence. Baruch Hashem, Klal Yisrael is a lot more affluent than they are nowadays than they were 25 years ago. Now, there still are a lot of people struggling, and there still are a lot of people that struggle to pay their bills day to day. A lot of people, don't get me wrong. But what the kids see is, and what the 21-year-old sees is the real estate guru, the guy that's making his $100 million deal. They see the guy that's a partner at PwC. They see the guy that's a finance partner at Goldman Sachs. They see the guy that's running his hedge fund and pulling in 10, 15, $20 million a year. That's what they see. And they think, oh, I could do that. And they want that tomorrow. They don't see when my kids were 8 years old, 7 years old, 6 years old, I was in the office till 2 a.m. to get to where I am today to have a lot more flexibility. They don't see that. They don't see the growth. They don't see the effort that's been put in with the mazel from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They just think, and there's more of an expectation, I could learn for 3 or 4 years, and then, yeah, I'm going to make a lot of money. That's just the way it's going to be. And that is far from the truth.
Wow. So you mentioned those sort of early years that you really had to push yourself hard as a, accountant in busy seasons, and you gave an interesting framework. You quoted Rav Newberger, how there are ebbs and flows, and you have to be able to uh, you know transition from different stages and keep things going. So looking back on your Torah learning, what were some of the things that sort of kept you going or allowed you to, um, you know. I think everyone can resonate with the feeling of being swamped at work and cutting back on learning. That's like, it just comes at you, and it just how it is. But then how do you make sure you're in a place where when things open up a little more, whether it's within a year, whether it's your career, as you're growing older and more senior, as you indicated, as your kids are coming out of the house, that you're able to really ramp up the learning when that time comes?
I would say start with, to me, it's consistent, have a chavrusa. You must have a chavrusa because you have to have someone that holds you accountable, whether it's morning or night. I used to have a morning seder and a night seder. I would learn with John Tiger in the mornings, 5:30, 5:45 till 6:30 davening. That wasn't for me. I was missing too many times. I was oversleeping. The morning seder just wasn't focused, and I had a night seder as well. Always having that night seder, always having that consistent time frame within the framework of the day forces you to plan your day around learning. What time can we learn tonight? When can we put it together? What can we do? And this way, if you have that chavrusa that understands he's going to have things that he can't miss as well, that he's going to have things that he can't do. And nowadays, even with Zoom and FaceTime, it's a lot easier to connect, to take that half-hour break at work potentially, let's say 8 to 8:30, do a quick chavrusa. When I was growing up, I couldn't do that. So either I was in person or was not there. But having the chavrusa framework was huge. And also, as the Chafetz Chaim and many suggest, you should have two sedarim. You should have a formal seder and you should have an on-the-go seder. And on-the-go seder is have a pocket mishnayos, have something you could pull out, have something to do shalom bayis seder, as lots of people like to refer it to. When your wife is getting ready for a simcha, changing dresses many times, learn another mishnah. So you have a couple of different sedarim that keeps you focused. And as your career progresses, as you move, you potentially could have time for more learning. And it goes with the ebbs and flows as your kids as well. When you get home, you got to spend time with the kids. You want to be helping them with their homework, carpooling, going to games. I'm a big sports fan. Watching your kids play, bringing them to sporting events, doing whatever you're going to be doing is obviously top of mind. And that's part of your avodas Hashem. It's part of your family responsibilities. But as your kids get older, I have 2 kids that are married, 1 kid in college, and I have a 16-year-old in the 10th grade at TABC. So the time at home is not as focused on them. So what I do this year on my son's night seder at YU, which I think is tremendous. He asked me to learn with him. We love learning, get into that story, how we got each other to really enjoy the learning together. And he asked me at the beginning of the year, he's like, Abba, I want you to be my night seder. He's a different morning seder. And I wasn't sure that was the right answer. I'm like, maybe you should learn with kids your own age. I don't know if that's the right answer. And that's Rabbi Newberger. And Rabbi Newberger said, Dov, I've never gotten this shot in 40 years. But if your son is asking you to be the night seder and you can figure it out and get to YU a couple nights a week and do it over FaceTime the other couple nights a week, and you'll be there 80 to 90% of the time, grab the opportunity. And to me, that's tremendous. So he's my night seder, also have a regular night seder, Yaakov Apfelbaum. We've been learning for many years consistently. So when you have the night seder, it sort of anchors you in your formal learning, which is very, very important.
You alluded to the story about how you and your son got into Harusa together. So I think you mentioned it to me before, and it was a great story. So maybe you could share it here as well.
Oh, this is a great story. He's going to kill me. Eitan is going to kill me for saying this on the podcast, but I got to mention it. I've said it many times in public venues, so he's not embarrassed about it anymore. He was a senior at TABC and not as into learning, to say the least, not as into learning, but a really good kid. played on the hockey team, loved sports, and he was coming up to be a senior. And he said to me, Abba, I would love a car as I'm a senior. And I said, okay, that's great. I would love a lot of things. It's just probably not going to happen. But my lease of my car was coming up. And I realized that I had an opportunity to bribe him. Now, I grew up in a house where my father would constantly bribe us. My father was a big briber, but the way that he bribed me was baseball cards. Come to shul on Sunday morning, you get 2 packs of baseball cards. And to me, that was like, all right, that's amazing. If I'm going to give my son Eitan a pack of baseball cards, that ain't going to cut it. Even taking him to a game might or might not cut it, considering how many games that these kids have the opportunity to go to. So I said, Eitan, I'll make you a deal. If you decide to learn with me the entire Maseches Tainis Gemara, an hour a week, we'll commit to for the entire year. I will extend the lease of my car for a year, and I will give it to you to drive to TBC, to drive it at your own, whatever you want. It's your car. And he had to think about it. And he really thought about it hard because he's a man of his word and he wanted to be serious. And he said, Abba, I want to do it. I extended the lease of my car. We started learning, and we learned the entire year. And Baruch Hashem, we made a siyum at the end of the year, Maseches Tainis. And at that siyum, he said, Abba, Kedarka Bakodesh, I don't want any friends at this siyum. I just want family. He's very humble, doesn't want to show off what he's doing. And he said at the siyum, he said, I started learning for the car. Who am I kidding? You promised me a car. I'm going to sit and learn with you. But halfway through, I don't know when it changed. I realized I just love learning with you. And I want to learn with you more and more. And we continued to do that. And then the following summer, he went to NCSY Kollel. I was able to be a chavrusa with him during NCSY Kollel. And I went to Israel for the first couple of weeks. And I was his chavrusa. And then I left. But then he was left without a chavrusa during NCSY Kollel because he was a junior madrich. He didn't have someone to learn with specifically. He was answering a couple of shilas, doing things in the base medrash, doing sports. And I said to myself, I have 2 choices. I learned my son for 2 weeks, and now he does a chavrusa for the next 3 weeks. Morning seder is 9 to 12. That's about 2, 3 in the morning. So I went to bed at 8, 9 o'clock. I woke up at 1 in the morning. I learned with him from 2 to 4 every morning for 3 weeks. And we finished the 8th parak above Mitzvah. And that just gets him going. And to me, and all of his friends' parents are calling me saying, oh my God, you're like a legend. Dov, you're a legend. You're waking up in the middle of the night. You're learning with Eitan. You're doing this, you're doing that. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm just saying when the kids see you acting in a way that gives such chashivas to your learning and learning with them, they want to do more. And he feels so comfortable with me with the learning that he wanted me to be his night seder this year. And I grabbed the opportunity, but it takes a lot of time and effort to get to that point. But don't be afraid to bribe your kids.
That's a really great story. And you mentioned something. I don't know if this question really relates directly to the story, but it did remind me. You mentioned that even senior year, the learning was not such a high priority for him, and this sort of helped take it up a notch. And there was learning before, but I guess the question is, right? We're talking about in this conversation a lot about ebbs and flows, things that come and go. Have you thought about the experience of being patient for a child, allowing them to approach things when time is right, not getting too disappointed or frustrated at various things that you maybe want to see from them? I'm now starting off my journey as a parent, and some of the kids, I love the kids; they're amazing, they're wonderful. But there's certain middos that I certainly am quite frustrated by, and their challenges. And I also see in the community other kids at different ages doing different things, and it's a little bit nerve-wracking to be frank and to be honest. So I'm wondering if you could talk to that point as well about allowing kids their time, allowing them their ebbs and flows, and sort of being loving and present along the way.
100%. I know that you love your kids. I don't doubt that for a minute, Yaakov. I think that setting an example, this is the way that I was raised from the beginning of our conversation. My father never forced me to do anything, but he would always present the alternatives. So every Sunday morning, I'm going to wake my kids up to go to Minyan. I'll wake up my 10th grader to go to Minyan. Will he go to Minyan every Sunday? No. But I'm going to wake him up. He's going to know that there's an opportunity, and he will go a lot, and he will choose to do that. So I will always educate them on what I think the right thing to do is. Do I think it's the right thing to be sitting in your room on your phone a little bit longer than I would like you to be? No. Am I going to force you? You have to have ebbs and flows. You have to have boundaries, very important. Filters, all very important. But in terms of forcing, I was never someone that forced my kids to do anything, especially with learning, especially with trying to do their avodas Hashem. The more you force, the more they go the opposite direction. And nowadays, the distractions, the things that are inappropriate are too close and too easily accessed for you to take that risk of turning them off even more just by you forcing them to do something. Rav Druk comments, Rav Druk is one of my favorite. Rav Druk comments, and he says that the father that is shushing his kid in shul the whole time not to talk will get a kid that shushes and talks consistently, as opposed to the father that just lets his kid deal with how he has to deal with, as long as he's not disturbing davening too much, but understands that his hasmada is in his siddur, and he's davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with full kavana. And if a kid wants to read an English book to be quiet, kol hakavod. Don't force him to be like, look in the siddur, we're on page here, we're up to Shema, we're up to this. That's not the way to do it. And I think that's an excellent way to model chinuch, not forcing, but presenting alternatives and giving your opinion. And there are a lot of different ways that I could talk about this over the years, whether my father was with us and my siblings, whether it's dress code, skirts, pants, boys, girls, etc., things of that nature. There's so many touchy topics. Present what you think is correct, present the alternatives, but don't force, and model the way that you want them to follow.
So I will follow up on one point. I'm sure it's not by far the least controversial of them, but it is something that I actually been thinking about recently. I have Baruch 2 girls and then 2 boys. So my older boy is 3, and I was recently doing a cheshbon. I was like, it'll probably be around 3 or 4 years until he'll be in shul with me on some level of consistency. Hopefully with Hashem, 4 years, 5 years. And I was thinking about the fact that, so first of all, davening is enough of a struggle as it is to do with kavanah, do it properly, and to stay awake and not be distracted by either learning or phones or all these things. Enough challenges there. And then he's also going to be there, and you want to sort of educate him and be a role model and have your own relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So you touched on this point, but I wonder if you can give me some more advice and chizuk in that regard about davening with kids around in a way that your own avoda, your kids' chinuch, putting it all together.
Amazing. I'm going to start with a story from my father. And this story, you can find it you can find it somewhere on the internet because someone sent it to me. Someone told this story. When he was the principal of TABC, there was a family from Muncie that was struggling and couldn't find the yeshiva in Muncie. I don't know if he was kicked out. I don't know what the story was. The kid was a little bit off the derechi, and he came to TABC. And the Rav of the community, and the Rav who was trying to interview the possible principals and leaders of schools and Rabbeim to see would this be a good fit for this potential Talmud. And he walked into my father and he said, I have one question for you. How do you get the kids to daven? What do you do here for davening if a kid doesn't want to participate and a kid is struggling with davening? And my father said to him, why would a kid want to daven? A kid has everything he needs in life. These kids are growing up with everything they need. Their parents have food on the table, Baruch Hashem. The parents have jobs. They have clothing. They have vacations. Why would he want to daven? This Rebbe walked around the desk and gave my father a hug. Getting emotional. And he said, this is where I want my kid to be. This is the type of place that I want my kid to be. I get emotional nowadays talking about my father. Sorry. But I model the same thing, and you have to model the same type of response. Come from the perspective of the kids. We understand why they don't want to daven. I get it. Davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, asking for your basic needs. R'fa'enu Hashem. I'm healthy. I don't have any friends that are sick. If you do, lo aleinu, then you understand it a little bit. My parents all have jobs, or even the ones that don't have jobs, many kids don't realize that their parents don't have jobs. Barech aleinu doesn't apply to me. We're talking about Etzemach David, Mashiach. What does that mean? It's hard. It's really, really hard to communicate. So the modeling and the understanding of that, to be able to teach them in a way that gets them excited and says, okay, do it step by step. I tell my son all the time before a hockey game, have a good Shmon Esrei today, and Shema Koleinu, ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to play well. And I said, no, I'm not talking to you about the fact that I think it's important to daven to Hashem about a hockey game, but I want to train his mind that you ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for what's important to you. And if that's important to him in his life, which it is, championship game is this upcoming Sunday, daven for it. It shows the muscle memory around what davening is about to try and connect them to that. Do one bracha. I tell the kids sometimes all the time. I teach Yeshiva Noam Mishmar. I teach 8th grade Mishmar Thursday nights, which I'm going to right after this. And I love doing it. And I would tell them, focus on one bracha. Say it like a lamdin. Pretend that you're understanding what you're doing in terms of what you're acting, to focus on one area, one small thing. That's something that my father always said as well. Focus on one mitzvah, one improvement, and you'll get there year over year.
So thank you for sharing those memories and specialty here. You reflect on the deep impact of your father. But it does lead to an interesting question, which is that empathy and that understanding. So I struggle with a lot of things in my Rosh Hashem, a lot of things that I could be doing a lot better, should be doing a lot better.
So do I.
And so then the question becomes, right, when you try and mechanech, so do you go all in on sharing that, or are you trying to express a certain strength and level of accomplishment that maybe you don't feel as comfortable with? How do you sort of balance your own shortcomings and struggles and allow that to empower yourself as a mechanech and not have it like drag you down?
I think you got to be honest with people. I think you have to sell them. We all struggle. We all struggle with life. We all struggle with, give them examples of when you were in their shoes and you couldn't get up for minyan. Or even nowadays, you're struggling. This year I'm saying Kaddish. And I can tell you it's been a big musser for myself at work because as an example, I'm modeling my mincha schedule. I block out 1 to 2:30 now every day because I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to 1:45. Now mincha is a little bit later. I'm going to get it to 2 o'clock, 20 to 4 o'clock. There's no mitzvah to say Kaddish. The mitzvah is to daven b'tzibur. There's no mitzvah to say Kaddish. And everyone takes the Kaddish year to the nth degree, which I understand, covered for the mace, covered for the father and mother. I fully appreciate and I could tie into that. But it's given me chizuk to say, okay, in the past, if I had a meeting and I missed minyan, and I missed the mincha, and I had to dive into the conference room, I talked to my kids about that. I talked to the kids about that I teach. I dived in a conference room. And to me, I was like, okay with it. I was like, listen, I couldn't make it today. That's okay. But now that I'm giving myself my own chizuk around, wow, that I'm saying college, I'm not going to miss a minyan. Why not carry that through? And I want to carry that attitude forward as I continue to do that. I just said this to my chavrusa last night. I got home late last night from a work thing, from a work event. I learned with Yak Alphabaum. We learn every night. Proudly to say we haven't missed a night since May 1st, 2020. That's a different story. But I said, I got to go to 11 o'clock Marav. That's the latest Marav in Teaneck. And I said to him, Yak, I'm so tired. If I was not saying Kaddish in my olden days, I probably would just daven at home. Fully admit that. But I gotta say the Kaddish. And I said, Yak, this is the chizuk that I'm giving myself, and you're gonna remind me about this next year at this time when I'm not saying Kaddish, and I come up at 10:45, I'm going to that 11 o'clock Marav. So talk to you about your kids. Be vulnerable. It's okay. We all have to grow.
Okay, so you spoke about your love of Torah learning, your love of public speaking. So talk about how you found ways to bring those together. And you mentioned the early days, the drashos, but now you're doing a lot of teaching. You just alluded to the Mishmar, which is coming up. So how do you get sort of started to get more involved in teaching, and how do you find the time and the energy to invest in that, in addition to continuing to be busy, especially now during busy season, but all year round?
Great question. I love teaching, and I teach a Chumash share Thursday night over Zoom for Beth Abraham. That started 3 years ago. Morty Rothberg, give him a lot of credit. I gave a shir in between Nechamav on Rosh Hashanah once. And he's like, wow, I really enjoyed this year. Do you want to give a Chumash shir on Thursday nights? And I think that's a little bit of a lost art, Be'i and Chumash. People talk about Be'i and Gemara. They talk about different topics. They talk about different things. And every week, we pick one pasuk, one idea. It's all on YU Torah. I started putting them on YU Torah a couple years ago. And it's Thursday night over Zoom. We get 10 to 15 people on a live basis. And then 100 to 150 people are listening on YU Torah, which is really, really nice. Sometimes more, sometimes a few less, whatever the week is. But it gives me the chiyus to continue what I'm doing at work. The fact that I have more time. And as you become more senior, I'm not working till 2 a.m. I have a lot of different pressures at work. I have different responsibilities at work as a partner than my staff do, and they understand that. But it also gives me a little bit more flexibility when needed. So it's a lot of preparation. Giving shiurim is a lot of preparation. I like to step in. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a shul because a Rabbi went on vacation for a week, had a bar mitzvah. I like to step in and give drushes as well whenever Rabbanim are away. Always volunteer my services. And Baruch Hashem, people enjoy it. They like listening for some reason. They like to get through it. And the Chumash shir really took off. And then people asked me to give other shiurim and things for someone over Hanukkah, things for a Purim thing, et cetera, which gives me that opportunity. But it's putting in the time at night. The nights are busy. The nights have to be busy. Late at night, there's a lot of learning that goes on to prepare. Every shir has to take some time to prepare. But I say that if you have the ability, HaKadosh Baruch Hu finds ways to put ideas in your head during the week. And it keeps me constantly focused on the Parsha during the week. And also I have 2 dailies. I have 2 daily chats that people ask me to start. After I did the Parsha shir on Thursday night, someone came over to me and said, Dov, why don't I do a daily Chumash, a daily Inyana Diyoma? I said, great. WhatsApp chat, we've got 220 people on it, under 3 minutes. And I will always leave it under 3 minutes. And I'll record it 3 times sometimes to get it to 259. But to get a key aspect from the Parsha and Yonah Diyoma, we're doing Pesach, you're doing Purim, Hanukkah, etc., because that's something that people could digest and it's easy, but it keeps me focused on the learning throughout the day. I'm thinking, oh, what am I going to speak about tomorrow? Am I going to pick up an idea? And someone said to me, we'd love for you to start some type of bitachon chat. I said, okay, but before I committed to that, do I have the time to do it? And we started a bitachon chat. There was someone's grandson that had cancer, Glenn Pfeiffer, our own Ben Gila Yafa, and that's someone that we learn for every single day. And I said, we're going to dedicate this bitachon chat where we started bitachon of the Beis HaLevi, Emunah bitachon of the Beis HaLevi, the Ba Beis HaLevi, and we finished the entire Sefer going through under 3 minutes a day, not just reading. You read a little bit, you say a little bit off the daf, and now we're doing the Chazon Ish. And it just, when you have that type of chiyas, preparing late at night, it gives you the energy to keep going. And I'm a big believer in this. The more that you learn, I find that HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps you be successful at work, and it goes hand in hand. So I don't have to spend as many hours, but Baruch Hashem, things are working out, I think. And I give a lot of credit to that because you spend the time and effort your whole life. Like I said, it's a foundation. I would not be able to do this today if I wasn't learning those charusas when I was 25, 26 years old.
So you described the teaching really picking up over the last 3 years or so, and you described the chiyas that it gives you. Do you regret not doing more teaching earlier, or now it's the right stage in your life and career to really throw yourself into it?
I can't regret. I never had the opportunity. No one asked me. So do I regret pushing it more? Maybe yes, maybe no, but I don't know if I would have had the time to dedicate. Because as you're continuing, like I said, I made partner in 2008. So I was 31, 32 years old, continuing to build that brand of your business, to continue to build your network. I don't regret it. I think everything comes at the right time because Baruch Hu wants you to be where you are. You also have to have opportunities for speaking opportunities. But throughout all the years, I was always giving drushes in shuls. I was always giving a shir on Shavuos night. I gave a shir this past Shavuos night, an interesting shir on can you daven from a cell phone? Different type of shir, hashkafa, halacha, weaving it in. And people sort of like that as well. So I've always been giving enough. I felt like I taught enough, but not consistently to keep me happy, so to speak, in that area. And as I do more and more, it like feeds the beast. You really just want to continue that aspect of it.
That's very beautiful. So I want to transition to the last part of our conversation. You are involved, in addition to everything we described until now, and it's a lot, in a lot of different nonprofit initiatives. So tell us a little bit about how that started, what some of the big projects you've sort of built and are most proud of and most happy about.
Sure. I've always been involved in not-for-profits. I think it's important. I think that when my daughter Leora started going to Yeshiva Noam, and I got very involved with the board right away. I felt like it was important to give back. And when it's important to give back, you get involved. And that's something that my family, my mother, my father, obviously my father, but my mother was always involved in organizations as well, our schools, our shuls, PTA, etc. And that's something that's an achrayas. I view it as a responsibility. And once I started getting involved, I realized, oh, I like this aspect also. It fits a lot of the personality in terms of what I'm looking for, in terms of helping other people, helping organizations, helping them grow. Eventually, I became treasurer of Yeshiva Noam. I transitioned to become the president. I got involved with Mayanot, got involved with TABC recently. I wouldn't say recently, past 7, 8 years, and Beth Abraham. And then I got into fundraising. And I realized that I honed that skill in terms of being able to help organizations fundraise as well. And I'm proud to say that I fundraise for a number of different institutions. Fundraise for the Yeshiva Noam building, Beth Abraham building, led the campaign for the TBC building right now, which we just named in honor of my father, in memory of my father, in honor of my father, which is really very emotional as well. I did the Mayanot campaign. I started a school, helped start a school called Yeshiva Shalshalet for kids with language-based learning disabilities. I don't have any kids that needed needed it. Just got approached and said he seemed like a guy that could get things done from a community perspective. Did a significant amount of fundraising, got that school off the ground. That was in 2022, 2023. That school now has about 60 kids graduating its first 8th grade. I'm not involved with it anymore. You have to transition over to other people. I just started an organization with Rebecca Eliason called KFAR, which is an after-school program for kids that are in public school right now for whether it's learning issues, whether it's behavioral issues, anything but financial issues. Because any financial issue, you got to go to your day school. That's why there's a scholarship program. That's why we do the fundraising. And this is our first year during the program, and we just had our first sitter play about a month ago. And Rabbi Newberger presented the sedarim to each one of these kids. And this is one of my most proud things. I've been to a lot of school events. I've been to a lot of organizations. Seeing grandparents with their child who's in 4th grade get a sitter for the first time, tears streaming down their eyes saying, I never thought this would happen because my kid's in public school. And if he got a sitter, I figure I'd buy him a sitter. To have a full ceremony, music, balloons, presentation, the whole 9 yards was something that was very, very emotional. So that's a great organization as well. And I think it's a passion of mine to get involved. A lot of people don't like fundraising. I always get inspired by it. I get inspired by the small gifts more than the big gifts, honestly. But I realize that someone has to be the conduit to help match up potential donors who have wealth with people who want to build organizations. Because if you don't have money, your organization is going nowhere. So you have to develop those relationships with it, which I think is important. You have to be honest about it. You have to be unique, and you got to be able to talk through it and develop relationships to help that happen. And I'm not afraid of that either.
So, I mean, you sort of touched on this towards the end, but a lot of people, you think of fundraising as like you have sort of your network and you're going to try to maximize your network for your cause. But when you have like a number of causes and you're trying to fundraise for all of them, like how does that work? Are you approaching the same people again and again, or different people for different causes? How do you manage that?
Yes and no. I mean, I think some people are scared. Like if they see me, they probably run away. They're like, "Oh, Dov's coming. He's asking for money." But most of the donors that I deal with say "Kol hakavod." They say, "Dov, I don't know how you find the time to fundraise for all these organizations. You do have to find the right match, and not every single organization is going to match with every single donor, and that's where the legwork comes in, and honing your skills around relationship management, around being really authentic. I'm not just going to show up. You don't just knock on someone's door and say, "Hey, if you give me $100,000, you give me $1,000,000, give me $500,000." That's not the way it works. You have to introduce them to the organization. You have to see if this is something that they're part of. So parents, let's say parents of a school, that's the first place you start. Grandparents of a school, that's the first place you start. Members of a shul, that's the first place you start. You start a school with kids with language-based learning disabilities. You go to people that have gone through that issue because they understand it the most, and then you expand. So I'm constantly expanding that network, so to speak, to make sure that you're speaking to different people. But of course, there are the people that you know that you could rely on, helping individuals. People call me to help them with a variety of different things that they're struggling with. Knowing who's going to be able to line up what is very important, but having that real relationship. It's not just about fundraising, but a true relationship that you're building with the kahila and with the community. And they know that they're not doing it for you. I'm not asking for myself. I'm asking for an organization that you feel passionate about. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, they're going to look right through you and they're going to say no. But if they feel the passion and they feel that you really want to support this because of the case for support, you hire professionals sometimes to help you guide with the materials, showing why it's the right organization for this family, what you need, what the goals are, etc. It really is something that's important and needed and is recognized throughout the community.
And if you don't mind me asking, is this something you do
Right.
completely volunteer based? Because I'm guessing that fundraisers there are professional fundraisers, and there is there's a need for that in the community as well. But I'm assuming that if you're coming completely lishma, just because of your passion, then it's a lot easier for you, a lot harder people to say no, a lot harder people to be nasty versus someone who they're raising the funds, and at the end of the day they need to hit a certain quota for their month or year.
I'm 100% free. I probably pay, donate. So I'm actually paying to fundraise. I'm 100% free. If you want to hire me to speak at an organization, I call myself a rabbi, 100% free there. Pay also from a membership perspective. So I'll probably net out as opposed to that. But I think it's important to develop relationships with professional fundraisers, which I have. I have a lot of relationships with professional fundraisers, but also have relationships with organizations that help you manage the fundraising process. They don't do the fundraising, but they help you manage it. And I learned a lot over the years by going to seminars, honing my skill and working on it. But a lot of lay leaders don't appreciate is that when you put in the time of doing something, you can't just check a box and say, well, I'm not getting paid for it. So I won't put my whole heart into it. I can't put all as big of an effort into it. The return just not there. You still have to put everything into it, just as you would your professional life, your professional job, your family. How do you learn to get better at something? Is by practicing, understanding it, and going out and doing it over and over and over again. So no, I don't get paid for it. Never will get paid for it. But I think it's important that lay leaders appreciate that the effort that they put in has to be on par with what they're giving their professional life. And not everyone has the time. And that's okay also. Not everyone has the time, but everyone has the time to do something given where they sit within their ecosystem of life.
Amazing. That's very beautiful and very inspiring to hear. And it's really great. We're running a little low on time here, but I did want to ask,
Keep going.
you reached out to me with some very interesting follow up. This last part of the conversation very much connects to last week's episode with Alan Pfeiffer and Hillel Scheinfeld, both guys who are involved in nonprofits and fundraising. And so, there's a lot to talk about there, a lot to follow up. But specifically, you were talking about people who tzedakah itself is a question, is not taken for granted, even on smaller scales, is something they struggle with. So what have you seen with sort of younger people or people who aren't making as much money and how they struggle with tzedakah and what your advice is to them?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I love Hillel. I love Alan. I thought that was a great episode. I love all your episodes. Give you another plug. But I think that as people of the Hamon Am, the people that struggle a little bit, or the people that struggle a lot, there's a big disconnect. They can't relate. They can't relate to the guy that's making that type of money, that's giving six-figure tzedakah allocations to different organizations, and they do struggle. And I'm talking about Yashar people, Erlich Hayidin, that struggle with how to allocate their money. And do they take advantage of kulas, quote unquote? where they're paying tuition, but they want to allocate the amount of limudei kodesh, limudei chol. How do I do that? What type of calculation do I make? What type of expenses do I write off? And these should be consulted with your Rav. 100%. I don't want to mitigate it, but they should be shilas that should be consulted with your Rav, because every single situation is different, depending on, there's so many different needs. Special needs cost a fortune, as we brought up. Those people are going to struggle a little bit more. But then there are people that are just not intentionally cutting corners and not giving their meiser. In their hearts, they don't believe that they could afford it. And I think they need chizuk as well. They need chizuk to understand that even if I'm making $50,000 a year and I could barely put food on the table, if I give $5 to tzedakah, that's my allocation, whatever your allocation is. And if you want to talk about a meiser perspective, a 10%, how you allocate that, but they need chizuk to understand, make it part of your billing system, make it a bill, just like your electric bill and your gas bill and your tuition bill. To allocate that, even on a smaller amount. Some of the most inspiring notes that I've gotten over the years when I'm running campaigns, Dov, I'd like to contribute $360. Can I pay it over 3 years? That's amazing. That's amazing. That's someone who's yashar, that wants to contribute. And of course, kol hakavod. But I think that when we talk about the tzedakah, decisions, how to allocate, these are all important conversations amongst the wealthy, of course. People that are blessed from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because like we said, and like Alan said over and over again, and like Hillel said over and over again, Kadosh Baruch Hu is giving you the money, it's not yours. However, when push comes to shove, we all have Yetzer Haras and we all have issues, and I think that is an area that needs chizuk, that people need to be trained in a much smaller crowd. I'm not sure if a podcast is going to do it for them. Maybe yes, maybe not. I'm not sure if someone's going to have the guts to come on a podcast. I would say kol hakavod. Let someone come out and talk to you about their struggles. I think it'd be tremendous, because it gives them the chizuk to say, wow, I'm not the only one that's struggling with this. There are a lot of people that are struggling with this, and there's a lot of avenues and ways that could help me deal with it, to help me overcome, to Amir Hashem one day become a little bit more successful.
Amazing. This has been a really, really enjoyable conversation. And let's just run through our rapid fire here. 3 short questions, 3 short answers. We go here, Kaminag Eretz Yisrael, and we still have winter time for a couple more weeks. We still have long Friday nights. So what do you like to do at that time?
A family time, it depends how many people we're over. Also, love to learn. Obviously, I quoted before of Juk. Eish Tamid is a big is a big fancy one. I know sometimes you like to rapid fire in terms of giving you a little preview what the Svarim are, but a great new one that just came out, the English version of the Meshech Chochmah by Rabbi Emanuel Bernstein. I'll give him a plug, because he brings the Meshech Chochmah. It's hard to read, and I love it. I love the Meshech Chochmah for a lot of reasons, but he brings it down to people, picking out a couple of different essays and points on a weekly basis in the parsha. And I highly recommend that one. New one that just came out.
Amazing. And your father was such a prolific Marbitz Torah. Do you have a favorite vort, idea, drasha, something that you got from him of all the Torah that he taught that you would point out as your number one favorite or most inspiring?
Wow. I wish you'd have asked me this to prepare this. This just goes to show that it's not prepared. And my father always used to say on his answering machine, back then answering machines, after the vort, leave a message. So after the vort, leave a message. But I'll give you one on this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayakel. It relates to a lot of the topics that we're just talking about in terms of fundraising as well. And this is one that my father spoke about from the Rav with quotas. My father's a big talmid of the Rav, and always would quote the Rav in terms of his Torah learning, in terms of what he was appreciating. So the Torah tells us, "Kichum eidchem truma l'Hashem kol nediv libo yivel trumas Hashem zav echas nechoshas." Not the pasuk I was looking for. I was looking for the pasuk. Yeah, here it is. Beginning of Sheni. Vayavo kol ish asher nas'al libo b'chol asher nadva rucho. Oso he bi trumas Hashem. What does it mean, the difference between someone that's nas'al libo, that gives over his heart, and someone that's nadva rucho, that really understands and has a spiritual aspect to it as well? And there's 2 different ways to give. And the Rabbi explained that nas'al libo and nadva rucho could be explained in 2 different ways. That there's the individual that gives from the perspective of allocating what he could afford. And he goes through a calculation. And that person is giving the tzedakah as he should, kedarko b'kodesh, on a weekly, monthly, annual basis, doing what he has to do in terms of being a nasa libo. But another rucho is the spiritual aspect of it, taking it to the next level. Is someone that doesn't necessarily do all the full calculations in your head. And I'm not recommending not doing calculations, but he gets inspired. And he realizes, and he says, you know what? I'm just going to give to this organization. I'm going to give to this because I feel like it's important. I'm going to give to this because it's inspirational. And what Moshe Rabbeinu was telling Klal Yisrael at that time was, no matter what your personality is, if you're a Nadva Libo or you're if you're a nasa libo or nadva rucho, however you are, it's very important that you participate in contributing to the Mishkan. And my father would talk about that all the time in terms of not just giving tzedakah, but he would relate it to us in terms of our day-to-day avodas Hashem. Because he would say, you could be calculated in terms of your avodas Hashem. You got to get to minyan on time. You got to make sure you're davening bizman. You have to do the kriya shema. You got to do the learning. You got to check the box. But what is really underappreciated was the emotion that my father put into things. He was a tremendous Baal Tefillah. He understood what it meant to represent the tzibor, but learning from an emotional perspective, just because you want to learn to show the hislavas, when there's no schedule, and you're not going to make the time, and you're just going to figure out I have 30 seconds here, a minute here, whatever it is just as important, if not more important, to make sure that you get your heart into it.
Amazing. Okay. And finally,
On the
if you were
spot.
forced to quit your job, quit your fundraising, find a new something that you've maybe dreamed of doing as a kid, something else that you have an itch to do, what would that be?
Come on, you know the answer to that, Yaakov, but I'm going to tell you that's going to be my second career. So at PwC, we have forced retirement at 60. I just turned 50, and that's what I'm doing with my teaching aspect to try and get there. My dream is maybe to go back and get smicha. I'm trying to plan that out as well in terms of getting smicha, just from a credentialing perspective as well in terms of learning, but definitely teaching some sort. I'm teaching with one of your former guests, Laser Cornwasser. I'm teaching at YU right now, Monday nights, entrepreneurship. I'm his co-teacher. I'd love to maybe get a shir in YU one day. Who knows? Putting it out there. But definitely teaching, something like that, 100%. That's
We
easy.
do have some very senior YU figures who do listen to the show regularly.
I believe it. I hope you're listening. I believe it.
All right, Dov, thank you so much for coming on during busy season, no less, and we really appreciate all of your
Thank you for having me. I really had a great time.